Hello, good morning.
Hello.
Hi, Steve.
Greetings.
Which library is it, Steve, on your background again?
This is Aziraphale's bookstore from the Amazon series Good Omens.
Oh,
Hello, everybody.
hi, Milan.
Hello.
Hey. Hey, Stavros, good to see you.
Hello. Nice to see you.
Hi guys.
Hi,
Hey,
Brad.
I don't know if any of you had a chance to see, but Brad just pushed in the new FPM new feature, which is a very, very nice addition.
Yeah, I figured that was a pretty key one that would be very useful to have available for anybody who wanted to try it out.
For sure. Tiziano, if there's anything you'd like to say during this call about Fortran Con, anything logistics related, we can plan for that too. So just let me know.
Okay, thanks. Well, since I didn't plan ahead, I don't think there's anything to add. You will get, so for those who will speak at Fortran conference, you will get additional email about the schedule.
Yeah, I saw your recent email about Zoom. That all looks great to me.
Good.
So, Milan, would you mind enabling hosts to share their screens?
Yes, just a sec.
Not hosts, guests.
Okay, everybody should be able to share now. Andre, would you like to start with the community page?
Yeah, why don't we do that? You'll hear my son playing piano in the background, so I apologize. But let me start. I'll start with the community. So Lawrence created this awesome community at webpage. So it's fortran-lang.org/community. Milan, can you see it? Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we got it.
Okay, so at the bottom of the screen of the page is a contributors, I would say, section. The way it works is that we wrote scripts that take all the comments from all our GitHub repositories. For now, it's just GitHub. We'll add the scores later, and then it gets every single comment from every single user, and then it plots it, as you can see in this beautiful graph, and then you can change the date. So for example, if you are interested, like which people, let's say with the with the Fortran proposals repository, if you want to see who like were most active at the beginning, so you can see the users here, and they are sorted by the number of contributions. So you can see besides me was Fortran fan and Peter Klossler and Gronke and others. And then let's say you want to see who is active in the last month. So you can just drag the slider and let's say here. So you can see Sven, Fortran fan, MyCellulose, Peter Klossler, and so on. And then you can do it for all other repositories. So for example, if you want to know who is the most active, let's say at the at our page, Fortran web page, let's say lately. So you can see it's Lawrence, he's the most active person. Let's say you want to see who is most active at the Fortran package manager. So again, you just kind of slide it at the end, and you can see in the last month, roughly, it's Brad is the most active person here. So so it's just very nice to see like who's responsible for all the contributions. And so you can see for the standard library, it's Jeremy and others, you know. And so this is, and then if you do all, then it's just all lumped together. Again, you just do the last month, so you can see all the people who are active and how active they are. So it's just a very nice way to give credit to all the people who contributed. And so I'm very excited about that. And we plan to add more sources. So one thing I want to do is add our discourse, do the same thing with our discourse page and add it here. And also right now this is at the web page, but I think it'd be also nice to maybe put some of the most active contributors, let's say in the last month, maybe into the README, so that people can kind of see who's responsible for contributing to the various packages. Thank you.
Very nice, Andre. And can you tell us what counts as contribution here? Is it for now still just comments or also commits?
So okay, so good question. So we started with comments. So the thing that you see here is just comments on any issue or pull request on the repository. So what's nice about comments is that if you, let's say, submit some pull request, it will be counted as comment also. But if you just, let's say, you just review a pull request by commenting, it will be counted also. Or if you discuss something at an issue, it will be counted. So it's not a bad statistics. We are also planning to add just commits themselves. In other words, commits that get merged. And we have to figure out how to visualize it. Maybe you'll be able to choose. Maybe there'll be an option so that you can choose to see the commits themselves.
Yeah, I think that's like maybe one side conclusion of that is we want to emphasize that even contributing by just discussing issues and ideas is as valuable as writing code or documentation or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Very good. Andre, are you good with this?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So before we move on, actually, I see quite a few new faces here. So maybe just the few or several of you that that this is your first Fortran meeting. Maybe you just say hi and introduce yourselves in just one sentence, what you do.
Shall I start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rohit Goswami, and I'm a doctoral researcher at the University of Iceland, and I work in physical chemistry. So there's a lot of Fortran code, mostly legacy, mostly F77, just rewritten to be freeform, and then they're like, hey, this is Fortran 1995. Yeah. So I'm super excited to be a part of the community, and yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you. Jeff, welcome. Happy to see you here.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, hi, I'm Jeff Layton. I'm a solution architect at NVIDIA and all-time Fortran fan. So I'm really excited that Fortran's kind of coming back in terms of excitement. So really glad to be a part of it.
Welcome.
Welcome. Hey, Gary, welcome. Happy to see you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks for having me. Yeah, no, it's been great to join. I'm new to Fortran. I've been using it now in my part-time PhD. And yeah, I hope I can contribute at some level. And it's good to meet everybody. Thanks.
Welcome.
Thank you, Gary. You have already.
I'm glad.
Milad, hi.
Hi everybody, my name is Milad and I am a member of a SciPy development team. I'm working on linear algebra module and a new Fortran fan.
Great, thank you. Martin, do you want to say hi or in a sentence?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, welcome. So I'm Martin. I'm currently a group leader at Max Planck Institut für Eisenforschung in Düsseldorf. And yeah, we develop a Fortran code with no restrictions. So it's always the newest features that we can use. And I'm also using a lot of Python for pre and post processing.
Welcome, very nice to meet you.
Thank you for your discussion at the website.
Yeah, welcome.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know, Martin has already helped make stdlib more standard conforming by enabling certain flags and then helping us fix some outstanding issues. Okay, did I miss anybody? Is that all? We have David Bentledge too. Hi.
May I speak?
Oh yes, Stavros. Go ahead.
Yes. Hello from my part. I'm Stavros. I'm using Fortran since many years. For my PhD, I'm dealing with molecular dynamics and statistics mechanics. And I have some experience both legacy and modern Fortran. I received legacy codes and I'm trying to modernize them, let's say. So, do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'm very glad for this open source community with Fortran. It's like a great effort, a great opportunity to contribute and do something more with this language. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Stavros. David, hi.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm David Bentledge. I work for the Boeing Company in St. Louis in the United States. We have an application in my team that's used to track the fatigue life of F-18 aircraft for various customers. So the application, I think, has been in development since sometime in the 80s. So it's a mix of more legacy Fortran all the way through, I guess, Fortran 2003. I guess I'd say it's medium-sized. It's about 75,000 lines. So I've worked on that. I'm currently one of the technical leads for the team, and I guess I've just really enjoyed seeing the new website and all the things that you're doing. So it's quite exciting, just to see all the new things happening.
Thank you. We are excited.
Thank you, David. Okay.
If I may go.
Go ahead.
I may go ahead.
Yes.
I'm Ivan. I'm a PhD student in Munich, and I've been a Fortran user for around 6 years, and I use it to do both computational fluid dynamics and linear algebra. And I really like our new website and also the packages we're working on. So thanks to all of you for running this.
Well, thank you, Ivan, and thanks for all your help. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you all, and it really works. It's really amazing to me what we've been able to make together with just a little bit from everybody, and we already got something big going. And I especially want to emphasize, for me, right now the most important metric of growth or improvement is really getting new people to join. And just as an example, just in the last month, we had additions and contributions to the tutorials on the website from Stavros, Gary, Aryan. I may be missing few more, so help me out here if I did. But so all of them joined really recently, and already were able to contribute toward growing the tutorials, and also helping with other projects by discussing and contributing code. So as I said, my priority or most important metric is to really keep this sort of snowball growing further and getting more people on board to make this valuable for as many people as we can, and to make it better as we go. Okay, so let me see, what did I put here as an agenda? Okay, so let's first do just a brief updates from projects. Maybe we can start with standard library. So in the past month, I see that we've had mainly statistics contributions, and some statistics functions from Jeremy, and some quadrature additions from Nathaniel, and several other various fixes and improvements. And Jeremy, is there anything you'd like to say at this time about the current state, and what you think, how we should go forward?
Yeah, I think since the last meeting, we also set up a website with Fort. I don't think it was already last time, right?
Yes.
Thanks to
yes,
Isaac.
Thank you, Zach. Yeah, that was basically all Zach. Great work.
Yeah, indeed. So hopefully this will help people to find STD relief easier, and how to use it. And there's still some work to do there also, I think, to improve it. So it would be nice if some people can help us for that. Yeah, and then there's still some discussion on for sparse matrices and things like that.
Yeah, I want to discuss a little bit more that particular thread. So there was a lot of development mainly led by Andre and Williams, with discussion from others, but he has sort of has been put on pause, and there was maybe some maybe lack of clarity on how best to, like, what kind of API is most appropriate for sparse matrices, and using external libraries versus it being part of the standard library. So Andre, would you like to say anything about that, how we can move forward with the sparse matrices?
So I figured to move the conversation forward, I submitted a pull request with some sample code as an idea how the sparse matrices could work. And I used code that I use in production in some of my other projects. And I didn't mean it that to kind of say this is the only way, but only kind of as an idea how it could work, and have some code that we can discuss, some actual code. And I think we actually moved the conversation quite a bit forward. I didn't have time to push it since then. So the pull request is open up there, and people are welcome to come in and look at the code and discuss what, how they would like the API to look like. I think as always with stdlib, the code implementation is a little bit secondary. stdlib is sort of like a reference implementation. The key here is to figure out the API, and that's what and the reason I submitted the code is so that we have some code to actually kind of, I feel it's always better from a practical perspective to have some code to play with rather than designing the API without having any code at hand. Essentially, I'm kind of, I guess, maybe waiting for other people to chime in and chime in and discuss how they, if they agree with the API or disagree, and what we should do, I guess.
Thank you, Andre. And pending reviews from others, in your opinion, is this almost ready to sort of be used in stdlib, assuming there is agreement on the API and functionality?
As an initial, I would say step, yes. It's only the only thing I contributed so far is just a conversion from the coordinate format, COO format, to CSR, and we have to add all the other formats, and we have to add all kinds of other utility functionality. So there's a lot more. This is just a very first step, but I think if people agree on the API, it is ready. But we have to get an agreement, and I didn't feel there was an agreement, so that's why I did not push it further.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there was a lack of engagement in the discussion.
Yeah. So so I'm not interested in pushing in something that I feel we are not in agreement. So the first step is to kind of get more wider community agreement, and I think if there is one, then absolutely, then I think it's ready.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Let's see. I think that's what we have for stdlib, and then the next one is FPM, which has had really, I think, huge leaps forward in terms of functionality. And
yeah,
I play with it too, and my experience was really great. Really, it's kind of like for Fortran development and like starting a new project easily and getting a remote dependency in. It was like switching the lights on.
Yeah.
It was like that. So Brad, take it away.
Yeah. So yeah, I've kind of had the same feeling of, especially over about the last month since we talked last time. At this point, we have a prototype version of the Fortran package manager that I think is very usable and will be useful for anybody who's even just like starting Fortran. And as of yesterday, I added some functionality. It's not merged in yet for the FPM new command, which is basically, if you want to start a new Fortran program, there's one command and you're ready to go, ready to run. It's capable of downloading and compiling Git dependencies. So if you've got a project that's FPM, using FPM in a Git repository, you can list that as a dependency and FPM will go and get it for you and compile it, and it will work with whatever project you're working on. So that's been really, really a game changer. And at this point, I've got a lot of open source libraries that I've converted into using FPM, and it has worked flawlessly. I've put together my own Docker image for using for CI. It's not an official version or anything like that, but it's available. And so basically all of my projects are using FPM, and I've got a Docker image put together that updates on a weekly basis so that my CI for all of those projects can use FPM. Like I said, FPM new is nearly ready to merge in, just a couple of tweaks to the documentation and stuff. And we've also, I think one of the key features that is going to allow us to move forward the way we want is custom build scripts or make files. So if your project doesn't quite work with FPM, or if say you're trying to link in some C libraries or whatever, you can specify your own custom build script or make file that FPM will then call and use in order to do the compilation. It's got some interface requirements for how that works, but basically that makes it possible to take a lot of existing projects and even C code and wrap it up into an FPM project that then other people can use. So future development, at this stage, we're at really a kind of a prototype stage. And so for future development, we've had some discussions, and I think our plan is going to be to re-implement FPM in Fortran as an FPM package. So there's some steps that we're going to have to need to take in the near term, there's several packages that we're going to want to develop in order to make that easier possible. Most namely things like command line argument parser, because the command line is already getting reasonably complicated. TOML parser, because the FPM like package settings are defined in a TOML file, so we need something that can read that properly. Probably some networking HTTP type of a library for doing, communicating with if we get a centralized repository up and running, we'll need something that can communicate with that. So there's a lot of work to be done, but I think at this point, FPM is a usable enough tool to allow us to start to rewrite FPM in Fortran. And so that's kind of our plan. We haven't fleshed out all the details or what the timeline looks like, but I think that's going to be our plan going forward. And so at this point, mostly we just need beta users, try it out, see if you can write some packages in it, and let us know about them and make them available, and we'll try them out as well. Basically, let's just see what works and see what else we want. I'll also make a note. I've got a talk that's been accepted for Fortran Con in the junior track, so I'll be doing a presentation and a little bit of a demo at that as well. So I think that's all the updates that I had for FPM for now. So any questions?
I would add regarding the future plan that we still plan to keep the Haskell version around, sort of to be able to bootstrap our Fortran version once it's up, and so I think we'll see how this goes. But it seems that we will probably keep the Haskell version functionality kind of minimal, but enough so that we can bootstrap the Fortran version that will have the full functionality. And the reason we decided eventually to do it in Fortran, maybe we should say a few words about that too. We kind of discussed, what language should we use? Should it be Haskell or C++, Rust? And we thought about, and so our criteria was, well, we want the community to be able to contribute to it. That's the key. And Haskell is kind of tough, even for me, to be honest, to contribute, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. Mm-hmm. So we thought, well, let's use another language. So which one? And then we thought, Fortran is not a bad choice at the end, because it's possible to compile it to a binary. The community here knows Fortran, so they would know right away how to contribute. And it's easier to work with than, let's say, C++. It's missing some packages, as Brad discussed, but that can be fixed. And in fact, that will allow us to right away, allow us to use FPM to develop these packages. And so we figured, it's actually, it sounded a little bit crazy at the beginning to think we should do it in Fortran, but it makes perfect sense when you think about it.
Yep.
To be honest, I'm really looking forward to this rewrite in Fortran.
Yeah.
No, besides, the package manager for Fortran, having that in a different language is kind of awkward, at least for me, kind of like a testament to the fact that currently, with the current available libraries, Fortran is not ready as a general purpose programming language anymore, at least. So it's lagging behind in terms of easy to use libraries when it comes to networking functionality and other stuff. And I think the how do we say that, the kind of like side projects which sprout, I guess, from that will be really useful to the community.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Because we will be forced to develop these libraries, and we will not be only ones using those libraries, like a command line parsing, so you can have a nice command line for all the Fortran production code to be super useful, helpful. And you're right. Every other language, like Python has a package manager in Python, Rust has a package manager in Rust, Go has a package manager in Go, Julia has a package manager in Julia. So Fortran should have a package manager in Fortran. It just makes perfect sense.
I'd like to add to this a call to action for everybody here. Please, whenever you get some spare time, take a look at FPM and try to adopt your library or personal project to be FPM able. If you have it in a public Git repository, then other projects will be able to very easily include your project as a dependency. And then when you do it, just let us know, post an issue, and we'll be building sort of a human and machine readable listing, probably as a JSON file, listing of FPM able packages. That then you, perhaps even down the road, you'll be able to, do FPM list from your command line and see the whole ecosystem of available Fortran libraries that you can pull in like this.
Yeah, we have issues on the issue tracker. We have a kind of step-by-step process how to get there. If you want to get involved, all the details are in the issue tracker.
Excellent. So, and just a note regarding the Fortran implementation, I think before we take any practical steps, we should draft up a specification document, which will describe exactly the current behavior, the inputs that you get, basically the behavior of FPM. So it's a completed document that would allow you to implement FPM in any language. And then we have exactly a roadmap on which we'll use to work with. So kind of like, so far we've been, FPM Haskell has been growing kind of like, if you've ever played strategy games and there's like a fog of war, it's part of the map that you can't see, but as you move your troops, it opens up. So we've been kind of pushing the fog of war out, but now we see the map more or less, so we can have a much better kind of educated stab at implementing it.
The only thing I would add to this is that right now we are still in the prototype stage. And so we reserve the right to change things that are not backwards compatible. And the reason for that is that we don't know exactly what the solution is at the beginning right away. And so we just are iteratively improving things. And if, we do something that really doesn't make much sense, we want to change things. So how to say, so I don't think FPM is ready for like production codes. It should not be used there yet. But if you are, we are looking for beta testers who are willing and understand that things can change. So you might need to update your package if we change something that's not backwards compatible. Once we are really happy with the prototype and really happy with the design and everything, as Milan said, then we'll switch to production. And at that point, we will very strictly, of course, be backwards compatible. But until then, until we get there, just so you know, things can change.
Exactly. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, Andre, do you want to give your updates on Fortran?
Yes, just very quickly. So last month, I finally resumed working about 50% of my time on Fortran, and I so initially, Fortran was written in Python. I've rewritten it into C++, and I've been working on the C++ version and getting it up to speed, getting all the features in. I got the command line parsing working pretty well. It's Milan was very nice to test it a little bit for me, and I got the binary distribution working on every Linux. It's a statically linked binary. But there were some issues with that also, and so it's getting up to speed. And for the future, I would say for the next month, I have 2 summer students that we are looking at how to make Fortran work on GPUs, how to make do concurrent and whatever other extensions are needed to make it natively work on GPUs. And the way we are going around that is to use Fortran to prototype some of the translation. As a first step, we want to figure out how to translate Fortran code that runs on GPU to, let's say, Cocos, at C++/Cocos, because that's what let's say my lab uses in production, and kind of we want to figure out the path forward so that you can use Fortran itself and don't have to use C++ or Cocos. And so I'll be prototyping this in Fortran and having a translation from Fortran to C++ as one of the backends of Fortran. And so I'm very excited about that. And yeah, I think that's it.
Very well, thank you, Andre. Okay, I think the last item that I wanted to discuss is so the website tutorials, the organization, and next steps. So I mentioned briefly earlier, in the past month, we had a few great contributions. So we have a full new, what we call a mini book on building programs. Thank you so much, Aryan, for leading that.
You're welcome.
And we also had a great contribution from Stavros, which is a whole section on derived types in the Quick Start tutorial. Thank you so much, Stavros. And
You're welcome.
so what I think needs most discussion right now is really the structure, how we want to organize different mini books or tutorials. So we had agreed early on that we want to steer away from the large monolithic, all-encompassing tutorial, but breaking down by either by topics or difficulty or skill levels, or by teaching approaches. So we had sort of tentatively agreed that we would have like a FAQ, we would have best practices mini book, we would have something like a Rosetta code for Fortran and a few other popular languages, kind of, you do this in Python or MATLAB, this is how you do it in Fortran, and similar. I don't think we right now have a clear idea how to best separate the mini books on teaching the language itself. So there has been talk of having like a beginner, intermediate, advanced tutorials. At the same time, we also talked about covering different topics. So maybe you would have a mini book on all about arrays, a mini book on derived types, a mini book on parallelism, and so on. You get the idea. However, I think it gets pretty difficult to organize this in a clean way when you start mixing separation by topics and separation by skill levels. With different skill levels, I think the problem is that you have to assume what's beginner, like what makes beginner material, where do you stop with that, what do you put in intermediate and advanced, and so on. So there's some assumption going on there. Another problem is when a newcomer comes in and they want to learn more, let's assume they know some things about Fortran, they have programs and small programs maybe, and they're looking for an explanation on a certain feature. Well, do they go to the beginner tutorial? Do they go to the intermediate? It's not obvious ahead of time where they will find the information they want. Whereas if you have a clear separation by topics, then, you know, if you're trying to tackle something about arrays, maybe array slices, reshaping, and so on, you know you'll be looking for arrays. So you go there, regardless of skill level. So currently, my opinion is that we should aim for clean separation by topic. And then within each topic, you go from beginner level at the start, and then you build on through sections. And by the end, you cover the most advanced and quote unquote esoteric stuff, which Fortran has a lot of, thanks to its history. So at this point, yeah, I'd like to get feedback from all of you. Anybody who has an idea. I think Lawrence has some pretty good ideas. We have discussed some in GitHub issues already. So what do you think? Maybe Lawrence, you can give your thoughts first, and then we can follow up from there.
Yes. Can everyone hear me? Yes. So really, I haven't really got that much to add to you because I'm in agreement with you on separation. And just so everyone's clear, by separation we mean separation in these so-called mini books. So when you go onto the Fortran Lang Learn page, there's just going to be a list of these mini books. And when we talk about separation, we're saying, how do we separate topics into these mini books as they appear on the Fortran Lang homepage? So the mini book format is designed to be quite versatile. So they can be fairly short. They can technically just be a single page, though ideally you'd structure it into multiple pages. And by versatile, I mean you can kind of start off with a topic in a one-page mini book, kind of exposing the topic, and we can publish that mini book straight away, and then people can add to that mini book as we go along and grow the content. Finally, there is one layer of organization that we can do if we wanted to, which is we can group mini books on the learning page by custom categories. So that will help in people being able to kind of choose or find the topic that they're kind of interested in. But apart from that, I don't really think I have anything else to add, unless anyone has any questions. But it would be great to get some people involved. And if you have a particular expertise in part of the Fortran language and want to kind of expose that to the community, it'd be really great to see some new mini books being written. So do get involved, please.
Thanks, Lawrence. I want to hear from at least two people here specifically. So first Arjen, and then after Arjen, I'd also like to hear from Steve, what you think.
Right. Well, I think it would be a very good idea to have focused tutorials on particular subjects. The hard thing would be, I think, to identify what topics. For myself, I can think of a whole bunch of them, but they may not be the sort of topics that people are looking for. So perhaps we could assemble a list of topics and see what might be the most interesting ones.
Okay, that's a really good idea, and I will open an issue to discuss and come up with a list of topics that would be covered. Okay, Steve, sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with Arjen that the language is huge, and without knowing, first of all, without knowing what topics the audience is particularly interested in, developing training in Fortran as a whole language is quite an effort, and also requires skills that some people have, some don't. But the idea of, if there are particular areas of the language that need exploring, then there are lots of us who can put together a 1 or 2 hour talk on those sorts of things. So that'd be good.
Thanks, Steve. Okay. Any other feedback? Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, I was actually looking through the tutorial real quick, and I can see your point about beginner, intermediate, and advanced, because even the array section, which by the way is great, but you see things like under allocatable arrays, you can make comments like best practices, be sure to check the return value, and should you deallocate at the end of your code, or should you just let the code end and have it clean up there? What are best practices, or what have people found works well? I think that can fall into like the intermediate or advanced sections. So you could add to that pretty easily.
Yes, just to make a note on that, the current tutorial is by no means a complete and finished piece of work. If anyone sees anything missing or any little tips or ways to make it read better, then please do open an issue or open a pull request, because there are things that can be improved on the existing tutorial. And in finding possible tutorial topics, it might be a good idea to possibly ask a question on the discourse forum, I think.
Oh yeah, totally agree. I think it's a great start and a very appropriate start. I was just thinking with Milan's proposal to do beginner, intermediate, and advanced kind of within a topic, best practices kind of, in my mind, fulfills some of those intermediate and advanced kinds of things. You could call it whatever you want, but yeah, you got to have a start, and before you polish it, and this is great.
To add to your comments, Jeff, something I remember from years ago when we were talking about here about user manuals. What we most of the time do is create manuals for beginners, but people spend most of their time being intermediate users. So perhaps we should focus a bit more on best practices and people who know the basics, but not quite all the details which might be necessary for optimal use.
Yeah, thanks.
I would like to iterate on what Arjen said, because what I see with my colleagues, for example, is that most of them already know a language due to their studies. And most of them then simply try to adapt what they had in concepts from this language to Fortran, which usually ends up in rather messy code. So what might also be a good idea is to have also kind of like guides, Fortran for Python programmers, Fortran for C programmers, which also stress the difference when doing software engineering using Fortran compared to other languages.
That's a great idea. I just posted a link. I created something like this for Python to Fortran, side-by-side comparison, because my experience, and I did it about 10 years ago. Already back then, it was clear to me that new people to Fortran, they already know Python typically, and NumPy, or MATLAB, which is similar, but let's say Python is the most popular these days. So they know how to do it in Python. They just want to know, how do we get it in Fortran? And so just having it side by side is perfect. Didn't have time yet, but I always keep talking about it. I want to port all that Fortran 90 documentation into our Fortran Lang page and get it kind of community agreed upon. So when I did it about 10 years ago, I did it, I didn't know that any community. I knew just my advisor at Lawrence Livermore. So we kind of did our best to kind of figure out what the best practice is. But now when we have a community, it's much easier because we can all agree what the practice should be. And yeah, it's our plan to kind of port it. And so I can see a need from Python, but I also can see a need from C++. A lot of people know C++. They just want to know, how do I do it in Fortran? So having both, I think, will be very helpful.
I'll just make a note about that idea of coming from another language and how to structure that idea. I've seen a lot from like functional programming languages like Haskell, which is one that I'm familiar with. That there's a lot of the whole ethos of how you write code in that language is different from a lot of people who are coming from other languages. And so that is one of those places where you might look for ideas about how do you communicate the idea that you may have been familiar with this pattern and this is how you did certain things in this other language, but there's not a direct correlation of, well, that's exactly how you would do it in this language. You approach the problem slightly differently in this language so that the solution doesn't look the same. And so there's some ideas out there for some other languages that you could use to kind of structure how you communicate that idea.
I would like to add, so on the topic of users from other languages, one way maybe to find new users of Fortran is also to have some tutorials on interfacing with other languages like perhaps Java or even Rust or OCaml. So I've read some pages on Google about this, but if we had them like in one place, maybe we also find new Fortran users. On this point, yeah, I think it may be a worthwhile exercise to look 10 years into the future and think about interfacing with WebAssembly so that we have Fortran running in the browser. Some people have already tried it. I saw some very interesting
I think a few
blog posts about it.
Maybe a month and a half ago, I saw somebody who did that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I opened the developer console in my browser, and there was some Fortran "Hello World." I was like, "Whoa!"
Yeah, it was extremely hackish, but tour de force, I guess.
So this is not just for fun. So when I announced Fortran about a year ago, I got an email from Mozilla saying, can this be used to compile SciPy to run in the browser? So Mozilla has this effort trying to port all the Python stack to the browser, and so SciPy depends on Fortran, and Fortran is the only language that doesn't have a good story there how to run it in the WebAssembly. And so the first thing they did was asking, can this be used? So I told them eventually, absolutely. So it's not just a kind of a for fun, it has real uses.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That would be, I hate to say it, I'm accused of writing Fortran in any language I use, like Python. So I think it'd be awesome to show, if you're coming from Python, here's how you can write Fortran code that doesn't look like Python, or something like that. So maybe somebody in the Python world can teach me, don't write Python code that looks like Fortran. here's Pythonic code.
Yeah, I wanted to add to that. Steve also mentioned that, be careful with translations, that the concepts are different. I agree. Every language is different, but if you know some language, you already know how to do things. So it's super helpful to see, oh, okay, so I know how to do this, let's say in Python, this is the way. And so what we should do is kind of say, what's the canonical way to do that in Fortran, which might be a little bit different. And so we should absolutely stress that.
Yep.
I would also like to mention, I think it is a good opportunity to discuss about coding style. Not only as a tutorial, because this is very controversial, but as a guide for contribution, because more and more people will start contributing, and it will be, let's say, not so pleasant if everyone follows his own style, their own style. So better sooner than later to decide in a common coding style, and everyone follows this from now on. Perhaps it's a good time to start a poll.
So I actually have strong feelings about that, especially for the tutorials. I think if people are willing to contribute, say, a whole mini-book chapter in one particular style, right, then that's on them. Now, if they want to, if they're contributing code which breaks an existing style, then we should definitely say, no, this is not the right way. But I don't think it's fair to say that there's only one holy way of programming in this language and we as a community adapt that. I think it should be more about responsibility. If you're willing to maintain, say, one particular coding pattern and you're keeping that consistent, then sure, no problem. At least that's my sense about this.
Yeah, we tried. So we tried about, was it maybe half a year ago, to see if we can agree upon some coding style for stdlib, and just we could not agree. Half the community prefers 4 spaces, half the community prefers 2 spaces. The community also disagrees on should things be indented, like inside, let's say, a module. Should you indent the functions? Should you indent stuff inside the functions? People just have different opinions, and so we figured out, we don't want to hang up on this right now. Like, we have much bigger fish to fry. We want to kind of develop the tooling. But I agree, it is important, and it's unfortunate that, let's say somebody like Lawrence mentioned, you write a tutorial and then you want to copy and paste the code from the tutorial to your code, and then you have to reformat because you happen to use a different formatting. What I've seen in Python, it tremendously helps that they decided early on, we'll use 4 spaces, and that's it. And here is how to format things. They documented it very early on, and everybody except Google follows it. So that's great. Google, and the only difference I think Google does, they do 2 spaces instead of 4. But otherwise, so I think that's great. It'd be nice if we could agree as a community, but right now we don't. And so, I'm not pushing it too strongly because I want us to rather collaborate on things that we do agree upon. And the coding style, I think the best way, at least for now, is, as Lawrence said, if you maintain a tutorial, keep it consistent. If you contribute to somebody else's tutorial or some already existing code, keep it consistent. and hopefully as we go, as we build trust, as we kind of get to know each other better, and maybe we can figure out some coding style that we all agree upon, hopefully. And until then, we just have to kind of do what we can.
I will say I remember those conversations about style. I'm not sure we're in as much disagreement as that, but I agree in general it's more important to make progress. I think for something like the tutorials, right? If you have just consistent style within the tutorials, I think that's definitely perfectly fine. I think the one part where like style can start to clash is if you have, a ton of space changes and things like that. It can be useful to have, in running code to review changes to it. But as I said, we have bigger fish, or as Andre said, we have bigger fish to fry. But I don't think our disagreement was that big. I'll just say that.
Okay, I have a few comments on this. First, on the we have bigger fish to fry. So we said that 6 months ago when we were starting STDLib, and indeed we had bigger fish to fry. But now we are also in the website and teaching and branding and basically PR for Fortran business. And having a consistent style is important now. Andre said, when you're adding a contribution to the tutorials, just be consistent. And that's easy, and that can be easily taken care of in the review process in the PR. But right now, I don't think there is anything we can be consistent with. Meaning, right now, the tutorials that we have do not have a consistent style. So that's yet to be taken care of. But to do that, we do need to come up with a basic set of rules for the style. And I agree that this is way, way more important for the tutorials than it is for the code that we write. Because again, we are mostly in agreement on what's good style, with a few details. Oh, do you put a space after comma or not? I don't think that's as important. But for tutorials, we do want to present a uniform and consistent, clean style.
Yeah.
So I think it is time to come up with a basic set, and maybe we'll do some polls. So this course allows putting a poll,
mm-hmm.
And there's really not that many items that we need to agree about. It's really about, okay, do you write lowercase or camel case? Do you put spaces after comma or not? How much you indent? I think that's mostly it. Where do you put a space between? Do you put a space after a new line after declaration or not? Things like that. And I think we'll pretty quickly get at a basic guide, and that will help us make the tutorials uniform and stuff.
One thing that I wanted to say is I think whatever style we end up with in things like the tutorials or our exemplar, like if you want to see example Fortran code, go look at these projects. Whatever we say is our good example code is the code we're going to see more of, right? So people who come and start learning the language, whatever they see, that's what they're going to tend to write. And so we want to be sure that whatever we're putting forward as tutorials and example code and stuff like that is formatted the way we want to see future code written, because that's what's going to happen, is it's going to be emulated. So I had the idea of, for helping us decide on this, is finding a good piece of example code from somewhere and picking a few different styles and writing that code in those different styles. And then we can take a poll of like, what do people find the easiest to read? So read this section of code and then reread it in another style and reread it in another style, and tell me what you thought was the easiest to read and understand. I think that's that's the about as good a way as to be objective about it as we possibly can. Otherwise, we're going to have lots of flame wars about it. And I prefer 2 spaces versus 4 spaces and that kind of stuff. But so we want to try and avoid as much of that as we can, but we still need to make a decision. So
for the tutorials, couldn't we also just optionally render different formats? I mean, if we want, so we have like the code could just be easily linted by different linters, and then we display according to the user's preference. Like you say, oh, I like four tabs or whatever, and then you just view the same content with a different linter configuration.
So
do we have a Fortran linter?
Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, editor config works. I mean, it's mostly you can make it format anything you like, and it works all right.
Okay, maybe you can show us a little bit more about this. Yeah, I know nothing about that.
So what I've seen with C++ projects is that most use Clang format. They have a config in their Git repository. It's enforced by the CI, so no pull requests can be merged unless the code already conforms to the formatting. And every C++ project has a slightly different rules how things are formatted. And the Clang format just allows you to configure exactly how you want it. So in C++, things like where the braces should be, if it should end at the line or be next line, things, there's a lot of rules there. I can see something similar happening in Fortran. There are some linters out there. There'll be more linters in the future. We can follow exactly the same approach. Each project can have their own formatting and enforce their own rules. And so I think that will hopefully happen. Still, the question remains what formatting we should use for the tutorials, because as Brad said, as new people come in, they'll follow that that style. And so I think we should still agree upon some kind of style, at least for the tutorials. And production codes can use their own formatting that might be different. And the linters can, hopefully in the future, or even today, reformat the code automatically.
I mean, one thing that is probably a little bit simpler than a linter is just a tool that tells you, okay, this is bad practice. I know this from Python, where you have these tools that simply say, okay, don't do that. But it will not auto-format that for you. So something probably, I mean, you can start with simple rules, like having a module without implicit none is probably something you don't want to see. And probably that would be also something where most people agree on.
Yeah, that's separate from code formatting. And I agree. Essentially, it's enforcing a modern Fortran practice, and this is part of it. Things like how to declare your double precision variable, how to, how to, how to, let's say, declare a subroutine, how to get arrays in and out, how, like if you should use implicit or explicit shape, stuff like that. So, yeah, and I would say that I think the best way to do those is have a compiler do that for you. So one of the things that people requested for Fortran is to have a mode that kind of helps you, right? When you compile your code, you get all kinds of warnings saying you should use implicit none, you should use that, you should use that. Yeah, I agree. We should also work on that. That comes a little bit later, I think.
Andre, may I add one thing? First of all, yeah. I apologize for not being able to connect my camera. It just doesn't work on this computer that I'm using right now. But I just want to say that in this regard, I feel like the other languages have a lot to offer and have a lot to help us. And I don't see any reason why we couldn't get help from the other languages. For example, one thing that I found really interesting in C++ language was the core guidelines, which I think many of you might have seen by the founder of the language himself. And I think having those words coming out of someone who is an authoritative voice in the language has a lot of influence in basically pushing everybody in the community toward the unified approach. So if we, for example, we could come up with some similar approach, I think that would be useful, in my opinion. For example, I can say over the past years, Steve's blog posts have been a core guideline for me personally. I have learned a lot from that, from the kind of guidelines that Steve provides in his blog posts. So I think something similar to what Steve has done over the past years would be quite useful. And I think Steve is now leading the language. So I think he'd be a really authoritative voice in this regard, I'd say.
I 100% agree, and I think that's what we just kind of discussed. I think we all want that, and I think the way to do it is to have it on our webpage eventually in our tutorials and have a section there. Maybe there can be a specialized section just for that, the core guidelines. But I agree, we should absolutely have guidelines how to use modern Fortran with all the modern features in kind of the canonical way that everybody kind of agrees that should be the way it's used. That's in fact precisely what you said was the motivation why I created this Fortran 90 webpage, because back then, 10 years ago, there is all kinds of guidelines for F77 code, but I just couldn't find on the internet some kind of a guidelines how to use modern Fortran. And so I think we definitely want that.
Absolutely. And I have used your website as well, and I have referred a lot of my own students to your website. I think we need something like that. And what Steve has done over the past years with this blog post.
Yes, thank you. And I think we are in agreement.
Excellent. I think we covered a lot today. Since we're past the full hour, unless there are any pressing issues or comments anybody wants to add.
So I was just wondering whether it would be difficult to sort of have this sort of one source of truth for the Fortran community, I feel, because it's very, how should I say, scattered. Like, there's still a lot of resources and old communities, and so I don't think we'd be able to get to that. But I think the idea is, as we start building a more principled set, from end to end, then we'll have more new people join in with our platform, and then, it'll sort of like evolve. But I don't really know if we can accelerate that process, like if it'll help if we just say, these are the core guidelines as per us. I'm not really sure that would work very well.
I think Steve mentioned that some time ago, that the best way to do this is to just provide good content on our webpage and just kind of convince the community that this is really to join us, essentially. And as the community joins us, eventually it will become the kind of the Fortran page on the internet that people will just use as the default.
Yeah, I agree. It's pointless to try to force anything on anybody, but just be useful, and let people use it and participate in whatever capacity. Okay, anything else? If not, thank you all, everybody. Until, I hope for most of us, until FortranCon. And then after that, our next monthly meeting in July. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
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 Bye.